I saw. The pictures were not pretty. The words were not pretty. For the most part, the story was downright ugly. Was it the truth? They called it Detroit's agony. An estimated 13 to 15 million Americans all over the country just saw a very bleak view of the city of Detroit on ABC's Primetime, and they saw the mayor. There is no denying the city has tremendous problems. Tremendous problems. But did the report present Detroit fairly and its problems? Or was it a bunch of half-truths for the sake of making a compelling, sensational kind of a story about a big city in big trouble? We're going to be focusing on those questions in just a moment. But first, if I may, let me give you a little recap of the segment on Primetime, which pretty much concluded Detroit is a place lost in despair beyond the point of no return.
This is a racist story, or so the mayor of Detroit would have you believe. It's about the city and the mayor, and it's no Valentine, which, by his definition, makes it a racist story.
To attack Colman Young, that become a code word for black. To attack Detroit is to attack black. Politicians run for office by attacking Detroit, by attacking Colman Young. The media gets headlines.
You're a symbol.
By running bad... Exactly. You got it.
Colman Young doesn't like criticism, especially from outsiders. But outsiders should take a close look at Detroit and wonder, could it happen here? The truth may hurt, but the truth is, Detroit is burning. Every city has arson fires, but only here is there one angry night like Devil's Night. There were hundreds of fires like this during Devil's Night and the days before and after. Firefighters said there were nearly 400, but the city counted less than 300. Not surprising, Devil's Night is just more bad publicity for a city that already has plenty.
This is hell. It's hell here on Devil's Night.
Detroit is armed and dangerous. There are an estimated 1.2 million guns here, more guns than there are people.
This 22 automatic, I keep that one under my pillow with me.
Along with his 22, Art Sims owns a 9mm automatic pistol, an assault rifle, and a sawed-off shotgun. He lives in one of Detroit's better neighborhoods.
5 streets down, you got crack dealers, and you got people breaking in. They come down here, they see nice houses, they see nice things, and they want to break in. So, I got to protect myself from them.
You're prepared to use those?
Yeah, at all times.
Detroit is bleeding. If you're young, black, and male, you're more likely to die by violence than any other cause. Last year, there were 400 children aged 17 or younger who were shot in the city. 40 were shot dead.
Like a whole generation is being wiped out. It's like they just don't care about life. It's nothing to take a life.
Are you proud of Detroit?
Certainly I'm proud of Detroit. I wouldn't be here if I were not.
Colman Young has been the mayor of Detroit for the past 17 years.
Is it a safe place to live, a good place to live, a good place to raise a family?
It's a good place to live, and I think it's as safe as any other. There's not a body on every corner. And the average citizen in this city is not confronted with the fear of his life. So don't bring me that crap about Detroit. We're no different. We have the same problems as any city in America.
Well, it's true. Most big cities do have the same problems as Detroit, and in some cases, they're worse. Washington has more murders. L.A. has more gangs. New York has more racial violence. America's cities are on a dark and dangerous road. But you come here, and you get the feeling that this is what the end of the road looks like. Here in Detroit, we have seen two worlds, one poor and black, one wealthy and white. Two worlds with their backs turned to each other. Here in Detroit, we have seen the future, and it's frightening.
Detroit put the world on wheels. In one generation, these and other names created America's #1 industry.
Then the bottom fell out. In the last decade, nearly a third of all auto workers lost their jobs, and blacks were hit hardest. Detroit's unemployment rate is staggering. Infant mortality is twice the national average, and almost 3 times as many Detroiters fall below the poverty line. The mayor will tell you that the reason Detroit's so bleak is because it's so black.
in this country, black people are victims of racism. It's not accidental that the cities around the nation that have the largest percentage of blacks have the largest percentage of poverty, have the largest percentage of crime, have the largest percentage of unemployment.
But in Detroit, blacks aren't just the majority, they're the authority. They run the police, the courts, the schools, and City Hall. But black political power hasn't meant black economic prosperity.
In my time in Detroit, I have driven and walked past mile after mile of decayed, rotting neighborhoods that look like war zones, of burned out buildings, cracked houses.
If you've been coming any length of time, those were there when I became mayor. And a whole lot of that's been restored.
There are also people that say that any white mayor who had developed the downtown area and let the neighborhoods collapse would have been kicked out of office a long time ago.
Well, that's bull. That's pure propaganda. The neighborhoods collapsed because half the goddamn population left.
When it's hammer time in the city, it's tea time in the suburbs. This is where whites went, taking their money and jobs with them. There are now more offices here than in Detroit. More stores, too, so there's no reason to go to the city. The only thing the suburbs lack are blacks. One study called these among the most segregated suburbs in America. Suburbs created by white flight and black rage. July 1967, the worst race riot in U.S. history. By the time it was over, 43 were dead and hundreds were hurt. Blacks were angry. Whites were terrified. Whites like Norm Bittner, who moved to the suburbs the year of the riot.
I went to school with coloreds. I didn't want my wife being around coloreds.
Why?
Who wants them next to them? Everybody sees what they've done to Detroit. The white families have moved out of Detroit and left Detroit to the coloreds.
What if a black family moved in next door to you here in Warren?
The thing is today, suppose one family moves in, then another, then another. What do you have? Prostitution, drugs, gang fights, gangs moving in. Who needs this?
Young's contempt for the white suburbs has been a key part of his political success. Once, when the mayor was asked about enforcing gun control, he replied,
I'll be damned if I'm going to let them collect guns in the city of Detroit while we're surrounded by hostile suburbs.
To the mayor, it's quite simply us versus them. Has there been a failure of black leadership? Well, Colman Young's credibility has been hurt by a series of scandals. The latest involves charges that his police chief stole from a fund set up for undercover drug buys.
Look, man, I have been hounded for 10 goddamn years with allegations, rumors, and not one concrete charge. Now, after 10 years, you get tired of that bull.
But you're police chief?
I wouldn't give a who it is. It's an investigation. There have been no findings. You came in here to do a chop job, obviously.
No, I didn't.
And that's what you've done.
That's not true.
Oh, bull.
But don't you think...
I'm through now. Let's.
Why do you get so angry? Why do you get so defensive?
I'm not defensive. I am angry. I'd be a goddamn fool to discuss with you on public television an allegation, which would be the same as taking a goddamn stand. And who the you think you are to come in here and cross-examine me?
Well, it's not a cross-examination.
Well, you sure the hell isn't.
It's a question, and a valid question.
You're out of line. And as far as I'm concerned, the interview's concluded.
Children dead, homes abandoned, hopes dashed. You don't need to come here on Devil's Night to see that Detroit is burning.
I miss you, Quentin. We all miss you. Such a baby. Still a baby.
We asked Detroit Mayor Colman Young to join us this evening, and the mayor declined. He turned down our invitation, but he did send his top spokesman instead, Press Secretary, News Secretary Bob Berg. Bob, very briefly, to begin the program, is Detroit burning?
Well, Bill, I think a better title for tonight's show would have been Primetime Lies, rather than Primetime Lies. The people who put this together lied to us when they came in. They said they wanted to do a balanced show. They said they wanted to come in and show some of the positive things that were happening in Detroit, some of the things we were trying to do to deal with our problems. They didn't do that. They came in to do a hatchet job, and they did it. There were a number of lies in the show tonight. Let me give you a couple examples. He says that one of the mayor's secrets of his success is his contempt for the white suburbs.
Okay.
Well, in the interview that they did with the mayor they asked him, "What's your attitude toward the suburbs?" The mayor said, "First of all, my attitude toward the white suburbs is to extend the hand of cooperation." That doesn't sound like contempt to me. He talked about his efforts with the Big Four.
Okay, Bob, can I interrupt you there? We've got about 50 minutes to go. There are several people to talk to. You're going to be back. I want to let the people at home know who's going to be on the program. Don't mean to cut you short, but we've got to get this thing launched and going. So we'll get back to you.
Okay.
Bob Berg is going to have the opportunity to put some questions to the very people who put tonight's Primetime Live program, the report, together on Detroit. Joining us from the ABC studios in New York City, reporter Judd Rose and T.W. Chang, the producer. T.W. Chang used to work in Detroit as a reporter. We're also going to be joined by Paul Hubbard, president of New Detroit Incorporated, the Reverend Keith Butler, who sits on the Detroit City Council, is a frequent critic and outspoken one of the Young administration, Lawrence Patrick, president of the Detroit Board of Education, Tony Franco, chairman of the Greater Detroit Chamber of Commerce. We're also going to be hearing from Ronald Bonkowski, mayor of the city of Warren for the past 5 years, and the Reverend Jim Holly, pastor at Little Rock Baptist Church in Detroit. Plus,
Hi, Gordon. These are members of neighborhood groups, the grassroots of Detroit, people of hope, people who are fighting back, and in our many cases, succeeding. We'll get their reaction to the Primetime Live report coming up on this special edition of Action News Update.
Announcing the new 1991...
And maybe you have too. And every big city in America has big problems. Every city has a dark side. For the most part, Primetime focused on Detroit. We did not see much of a bustling downtown where the Renaissance stands as a symbol of hope. We did not see the booming development along the Detroit riverfront. We did not hear about the 35,000 volunteers in Detroit neighborhoods who joined forces in the battle to snuff out Devil's Night and its fires. We did not see the Indy cars zipping around downtown for the Detroit Grand Prix. We did not see the glory of the International Freedom Festival, which attracts hundreds of thousands of people from the city, the suburbs, and another country, Canada, for a celebration of freedom. Many would agree the report of Detroit's death is premature. Many would agree that what was reported tonight was the truth. Many would say it was the truth, but not the whole truth. Channel 7's Guy Gordon spent part of tonight with a group of Detroiters, all members of neighborhood groups that patrolled parts of the city of Detroit on Devil's Night. They watched their city on Primetime Live tonight at the Sheraton Southfield. Guy and his people join us now with their reaction in this live action camera report. Guy?
Bill, that was the question that we asked of these people, and we asked them to keep it in mind as they watched the report. Is it accurate, first? And secondly, is it fair? Well, they cited a number of statistics and a litany of social problems in Detroit. Yes, there is too much bleeding, dying, burning, too many fires, too many guns. That is the truth, and these people do not deny that. But it is only part of the truth.
This is a racist story, or so the mayor of Detroit would have you believe.
That opening statement is one conclusion these viewers agree with. They feel it was told from a racist viewpoint.
They had a choice here. They had a choice to show it one way or to show it another way. And they chose to show it in the worst way.
This Ravendale neighborhood group from the east side and this west side neighborhood group covered 80 blocks together during Devil's Night, and there were no fires on their watch. And they are angry. None of the 35,000 Devil's Night volunteers, nor any other residents who are the hope of this city, were depicted.
You know, they didn't show the houses that we all live in, the $35,000 to $40,000 houses, the $30,000 houses. Yeah, the ones where we get out and we plan every spring. They didn't show that.
Do you think that Mr. Bittner is representative of the average suburbanite, or is he in a minority?
I'd say he's about average. I really would.
There you're shaking your head.
I disagree with you, Bob, and we live in the same community.
Yeah.
I believe that Mr. Bittner is... Something must have happened to him somewhere along the way. He certainly isn't average. We're average.
Look, man, I have been hounded for 10 goddamn years with allegations, rumors, and not one concrete charge.
Colman Young, did he help or hurt Detroit's image tonight with the way he conducted himself? I'm thinking mainly the language he used in the way...
I agree that his language is just out of character. I think that he not only hurts Detroit as much, but I think he hurts himself even more.
They drive him to a point where he said these different things that makes the city look bad.
The consensus here, Colman Young, the city's image, he deserves some blame for damaging it tonight, but there are many people here that feel that he was driven to that he was baited by two reporters that wanted to get a negative and controversial story. Reverend Eddie Edwards, why do you think that they did the story in the first place?
To me, it's very obvious that they're propagating racism. It seems to be the mood of the country right now, and therefore they jumped on the bandwagon. I'm extremely disappointed with the media, that they would put something like that together and send it over the airwaves for 13 to 15 million people to see about a city in our great country to show that. Obviously, it was unbalanced, and we just don't have, and we don't have a chance to show the other side, and so they've made it happen that way, and I'm very disturbed, angry, and saddened by it.
All right, Reverend Edwards, thank you very much. We asked people, too, what kind of a message that other Americans would come away after seeing this story, and they felt it was something like this. People will say, this is what happens when blacks get in control. This is all that blacks do. But these people, I think, will agree that they're going to use this story that they see as negative to rebuild and to help rebuild this city, and they're going to try to take some strength and incentive from it. Live from the Sheraton Southfield, these people were here for a banquet tonight. That's why we're here. I'm Guy Gordon, Channel 7 Action News reporting. Bill?
Guy, thank you, and thank your people very much. Rejoining us now is Bob Berg, and from the ABC television news studios in New York City, the reporter and the producer of the Primetime live segment on Detroit, Judd Rose, the correspondent, and T.W. Chang, the producer. Mr. Chang used to be a reporter at a television station in Detroit. Mr. Chang, Mr. Rose, thank you very much for joining us at this juncture in our program. I don't know if you heard Bob Berg's earlier statement, but he said that the... pardon me?
Thanks for having us here.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us. Bob suggested that the program might have been better titled tonight, Primetime Live. What's your initial reaction to that?
Well, obviously, we stand by our story. It's a balanced story. It's a fair story. We take no pleasure in the problems that Detroit has. We're not gloating. We're not reveling in it. Nevertheless, our job is to do a journalist's job, not a public relations man's job, which I get the feeling that's what City Hall would rather we do. We stand by what we said. We don't like the facts. They're sad facts, but they are facts nevertheless. Let me respond directly to something that Bob Berg said. He said that we took the mayor's response about the suburbs out of context, or misrepresented him as having contempt for the white suburbs when he said he extends a hand. Mr. Berg might have gone on to say that in that same response from the mayor, he said that I asked him directly, do you think that the white suburbs are racist? And he said, yes, you have more of a chance of having crosses burned on your lawn, of having skinheads attack you and Klansmen attack you if you live in the white suburbs. That was the complete answer. Bob Berg, you want to respond to that?
That wasn't the complete answer.
Go ahead,
Bob. The complete answer, there was a question asking the mayor if there was racism in the suburbs. And there is, of course there is. But the way Judd just described it is another misrepresentation, another lie.
Bob, do you think that over the years, Mr. Berg, do you think over the years Colman Young has built a bridge for the suburbs?
Yes, I do. Why do you
really
think,
believe that?
Why do you think the Big Four have been so successful? You know, they meet every month. He works very closely with them. Just last month, he was out in Macomb County, talked about the common interests that we have in this region. We need to work together. He works with corporate leaders from throughout Southeast Michigan. He regularly attends meetings with groups like Detroit Renaissance, which is made up primarily of people who live in the suburbs. Of course he's reached out to the suburbs. And if you had done a decent job of reporting when you were here, you'd know that.
Let me ask you. Well, when I was here for 5 years, Bob, in Detroit, and one of the reasons I did this story, and I agonized and thought a great deal about the tone of the story, and about what we did in the story. Because I lived in Detroit for 5 years, and I thought of myself as a Detroiter. And I decided that the people who really needed to hear that story, the people I was doing the story for, were people like Gloria G. For 5 years, I covered stories in neighborhoods in Detroit where kids were killed. And one thing that surprised me, if I could finish, one thing that surprises me, since you called me a liar, one thing that surprises me is the reaction I've seen tonight to our report is nothing. I mean, it's so much stronger and more passionate than the reaction I've ever seen to kids being killed and kids being shot. And that's what bothers me. I think our story was an honest, hard-hitting story, a fair story. And one thing you've not said is that when I asked you first to do the mayor, I asked the mayor to do the interview with us, we were turned down until I said we would do the story regardless of whether the mayor did the interview or not.
I want a clarification.
That is not true. That is just not true.
Bob, could I get a clarification on this? Is it your version that when T.Y. Chang and Judd Rose asked to do this story and asked for an interview of the mayor, that they told you, we want to do a positive story about Detroit? Is that your contention?
T.Y. told me that the story was prompted by the New York Times excerpt of the Devil's Night book. He told me he thought that that was an unfair representation of Detroit, that he had convinced the people at ABC that they should come in here and do a much more balanced job, that this city had problems, which everybody recognizes, and which the mayor works on every day, but that it also had a lot of things going for it that nobody knew about. And he talked about such things as the large middle-class housing here. He said it had some of the nicest housing in the country. I didn't see that tonight.
And North Rosedale Park and Harbor Town and downtown development, which we did show.
For about 3 seconds.
Well, it wasn't 3 seconds, Bob. It was more like about a minute's worth, and we showed all of those things. I think our story speaks for itself. It was balanced. We showed healthy neighborhoods.
Your story does speak for itself. But you came in here under false pretenses. I told you before the interview that the mayor would not take any questions on the investigation because it's underway.
And he didn't take any questions.
Every reporter in town knows that he hasn't talked about that all year. You decided after 90 minutes that you'd bait him to see if you could get him to react to it. And what you asked him, what you did was tell him that he was corrupt. And I think anybody who is told that they're corrupt is going to react angrily.
Gentlemen, there's plenty of time for equal time here. I have to interrupt at this point. We have to take a commercial break. There are several more people with whom to talk. You're going to be with us for the remainder of the program, and we'll be getting back to you momentarily. The Detroit response to Primetime Live continues with the Reverend Jim Holley and the mayor of Warren, Michigan, Ronald Bonkowski. When we come back, consider surprising comments on the Primetime Live segment. The Reverend Jim Holley, pastor of the Little Rock Baptist Church, believes that both blacks and whites are responsible for Detroit's problems.
Whites have the money, blacks have the political power. The political power and the money have not been on the same track in the last 17 years. And as a result, you know, our city is falling apart.
Racism has played a tremendous part in terms of setting Detroit back. But at the same time, I think it's only fair that no white man in the world can do as much to us in the city of Detroit that we've done to ourselves.
Joining us now live to expand on those comments is the Reverend James Holley. Reverend Holley, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Expand upon that last comment, if you would, please. No white man could have done to us what we've done to ourselves.
Well, again, I was under the impression, Bill, that we were talking about a positive story for Detroit. I was in that particular, the interview took about an hour and a half. I was trying to give balance to the fact that surely we have some blame in this. You can't blame it all on racism. That we do have some blame that should be placed on ourselves because we have a responsibility to try to come together and work and make the best of a bad situation. And it was out of the context of perhaps a 15-minute piece that I was doing in regards to trying to bring some balance to the piece that I was interviewed with.
Let me get this straight, Reverend Holley. You talked to Judd Rose and you talked to T.Y. Chang for about, you said an hour?
About an hour and a half. I think the interview went an hour, a little over an hour with T.Y. Chang.
And how much of that hour and a half did they use in the air? 30 seconds?
I don't know. I wasn't keeping time, but it was a very small piece because, again, I was trying to bring some balance to the story because I felt like that it was not just a matter of just blaming it all on racism, Bill, but that the fact is that we have some responsibility in the city of Detroit, and that and we would take that part of it. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that whenever black people are in control, it is our feeling that whites will not participate with the finance.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit with another person who's in the political spotlight, if we can. Also with us tonight, the mayor of Warren for the past 5 years, Ronald Bonkowski. Ronald Bonkowski, you just heard Reverend Holly say that he was interviewed for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I don't know, maybe they used 60 seconds of it. You've just heard Reverend Holly say what he had to say about racism and whites. You're a Detroiter. You're from this area. You're the mayor of Warren. You saw what Mr. Bittner said about how he feels about having blacks or coloreds move next door. Give me some reaction to what you've seen and heard tonight, both in Primetime and what we've done so far at 11.
Bill, I'll tell you very honestly, I think that the program was a disservice to the city of Detroit. I think Detroit needs help. I think the mayor of Detroit, as I, each have to attend to the needs of our individual constituencies. Warren is not much different than Detroit. We're a very young community as it relates to the city of Detroit. We had neighborhoods and have neighborhoods that are in need of help. We use aggressive programs such as nuisance abatement. We have community watch groups, neighborhood awareness groups. We use our police department very actively to help control problems that might evolve. And I think that, there was an indication of an extension of an olive branch some years ago when I was elected mayor. And frankly, Colman Young called a meeting when we had one common denominator, and that was the loss of federal revenue sharing funds.
I remember that.
Yeah, since then, frankly, there have been no meetings between the suburban mayors and the mayor of the city of Detroit.
Do you think that Colman Young perceives you as a white racist?
Well, he has alluded to that in the past, Bill, but I'm certainly not a white racist. I'm not stupid. At least I don't think I am. So, of course, there might be some people out there that disagree with that statement, but I will tell you this, that my responsibility as the mayor and full-time mayor of the third largest city in the state of Michigan is to tend to the needs of my community, and we attempt to do that to the best of our ability. Everything revolves around tax dollars or revenues and how those dollars are spent. Different priorities are put in different places.
Well, if you and the mayor of Detroit don't get along, Ronald Bonkowski, in your opinion, is it your fault as the white mayor of a predominantly white suburb, or is it the fault of Colman Young, the black mayor of a predominantly black American city?
I think to make the statement, Bill, that we don't get along is incorrect.
Fine, straighten it out.
There is no communication between the mayor of the city of Detroit and the mayor of the city of Warren.
Whose choice is that?
Well, the mayor of Detroit, and I have a great deal of respect for Colman Young. I think he's accomplished a lot, but I think a lot more needs to be done. One area that I can specifically cite was the area of the city of Detroit airport expansion.
I think you were referred to as stupid, weren't you?
I was, and the mayor turned his project over to the Detroit City Council before consultation with the city of Warren or any of its elected representatives. Before we knew we were in the midst of an airport expansion that directly impacted on this community. And I would think that the mayor indicated that protocol would have required me to call him. Okay. I called him, but it was too late.
Okay. Bob Berg, I suppose you're listening to Mayor Bonkowski, and Judd and T.Y., I suppose you've listened to him. Bob, what is your reaction to the fact that Mayor Bonkowski has just said that there is no communication between the mayor of Detroit and the mayor of Warren?
Yeah, I'd like to refresh his memory a little bit. About a month and a half ago, he attended a meeting with a number of other suburban mayors and Mayor Young that the mayor called to discuss the city airport project and to bring them up to date on where we are. And he's going to get together with them again. He provided them all with copies of the environmental impact statement and asked for their comments and said he'd be getting back to them again as things develop. I don't know how you can say there's no contact or no communication.
Okay, we'll get back to that in just a second.
Going on.
Judd and T.Y. Chang, you heard Mayor Bonkowski, a white mayor in a predominantly white, and I guess you would call it a wealthy suburb. We don't think of Warren as being filled with wealthy people. Say that he thinks your report was a disservice to the Detroit metropolitan area. How did you expect the 17 or 16-minute piece that you put together, how did you expect it to play in the white suburb? Can I ask that question?
Well, I really didn't think about whether it would play or not. That's not the point of what we were doing. But let me, and I'll answer that question, but let me also say, we interviewed Mayor Bonkowski. T.Y. spent some time with him. We made a choice as a matter of time not to use the interview. But Mayor Bonkowski, who says that we did a disservice to Detroit, in the interview with us said, among other things, that he thought that Detroit looked like Beirut, Lebanon.
Jump in, will you please, Mayor Bonkowski?
I'll be happy to, Bill. As it appeared to me, T.Y. was leading me into to a negative impact in the city of Detroit. It's true, there are areas in the city of Detroit that are completely leveled. I don't think the suburbs contributed to that. I think the people that came to the suburbs came because they were looking for more in life. We developed this community around the neighborhood school concept. It developed around the regional concept. And frankly, you know, I'm not going to let a reporter, because I've been interviewed by a number of them, indicate to me, and I would like to respond to Bob Berg, by the way. The meeting that the mayor called of the suburbs was a reaction to all of the suburbs banding together against the proposed expansion of City Airport. That's the reason the mayor
Okay, I'm trying to keep some continuity here. Bob Berg is, according to T.Y. Chung, called T.Y. Chung a liar. You feel that you were trying to be sucked into a negative interview. Judd says that they really weren't concerned about the way they thought it was going to play in the suburbs. Those are some interesting things, and I'm going to take a break here, Judd, and we'll get back, and we'll continue to mix it up a little bit with a roundtable discussion, including some other people from this Detroit metropolitan area. This is kind of a complicated thing to do, but I think we're getting at it. One, T.Y. Chang, Bob Berg, and the correspondent, Judd Rose. I wonder if, did I hear you correctly, and let's try to keep our answers concise, gentlemen. Did I hear you, Mayor Bonkowski, say that you felt when you were being interviewed by T.Y. Chang and Judd Rose that you were trying to be maneuvered, if you will, conned into saying negative things about Detroit?
Yeah, I think that's obvious to me now, Bill, that I haven't seen myself as any part of this program.
Did you say negative things?
I did say that there are parts of Detroit that look like Beirut, Lebanon, and that is in fact the truth. I don't deny I said that.
Bill,
okay, go ahead. Jump in, Judd.
Can I raise a question, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious as to how it is that a network reporter and a network producer were somehow able to lead an experienced politician like Colman Young and an experienced politician like Ron Bonkowski, two intelligent, grown-up men, lead them into this evil trap. Isn't it interesting that everybody, and I would even have to include Reverend Holly, who I have a great deal of respect for, that all of these people were somehow led down the primrose path by the both of us?
You know, Judd, you've been in television long enough to know that you interview anybody for 90 minutes, 2 hours, and you take 30 seconds of what they say, and you jump cut it, so you're not taking a complete continuity of what they said, but you jump cut one piece from here, one piece from there, and you can make them say anything on camera.
Well, Bob, I defy you to show me anywhere in our story where Colman Young was taken out of context. We did have cutaways. That's standard in every TV news story, but not once. Not once did we distort the meaning or take it out of context.
Every one of those sound bites was a total continuity from beginning to end. You didn't cut out any pieces in the middle.
I didn't say that. I said that in almost every television news story, for matters of time, for matters of concise statements, we always
So you always, in other words, you always
But-
doctor what you do.
No. Doctor
That's what
is
you
not the
said.
word. No, that's not what I said, and typically you're distorting what we say.
Can I jump in here, gentlemen? And Judd, I want to be very honest with you. I went over the recorded transcripts of your interview with Colman Young. I think it ran 62 pages. You read about 3 minutes and 40 seconds of Colman Young in the total package tonight. And in virtually every segment that you ran, you had the mayor saying GD, a couple of F words, a couple of other words, and yet throughout the 62 pages, there isn't much of that at all.
Well,
there isn't much of that at all.
I would propose to you that A.
And I know Colman Young pretty well.
Well, I would ask you a question. Why would the mayor of a city as big as Detroit, a man as experienced as Colman Young, why would he, in front of a network television camera, use that kind of language and then not expect it to be used?
You didn't answer his question, Judd.
Well, let me ask. Why don't you ask Judd's question, though, Bob? I mean, Colman A. Young, and you were sitting there, was going into Kansas City. He was going into Iowa, Des Moines, San Francisco, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Green Bay, all over America. Didn't you, at some point, Bob, feel the responsibility to stand up and say, "Hey, Colman, we're going coast to coast with this thing. You're presenting the image of this Detroit." Did you ever think about that, Bob?
Well, you know, Judd didn't show the question that angered the mayor. And the question was Judd directly telling the mayor that he was corrupt, and then waiting for a response.
That's inaccurate.
And I think that I think, Bill, if somebody said to you that you're corrupt, I think you'd get angry.
Mr. Berg, was that the actual quote that you're saying we said? You don't remember we said federal officials say
that you're corrupt.
That's different from saying you are corrupt.
Well, and then Judd denied saying that when the mayor asked him about it.
But did he say, in fact, that federal officials said it? We didn't say it.
But, you know, can I throw something
Are we
here,
reaching
Bill?
the point here where it's kind of moved? Either we said,
Bill,
I have a quick question for T-Wall.
Well, just a moment, bro. Just a moment, Bob.
Judd, I've got to break in here for just a second. This is a complicated show to do. I don't know if you've anchored one of these before, but I've got about 10 people with whom to deal, including a floor director and a producer. We will be taking a break. I guarantee you, we're not going to cut you out of the rest of the show. We will now have a roundtable discussion. Joining us are Paul Hubbard, president of New Detroit, Detroit City Councilman Keith Butler, Lawrence Patrick, president of the Detroit Board of Education, and Anthony Franco, chairman of the Greater Detroit Chamber of Commerce. Gentlemen, you've been watching and you've been listening. Let me go to the person who is on the Detroit City Council, Keith Butler. Keith, you're young, successful, outspoken. Keith, we're going to get to you in just a moment. Somebody just whispered in my ear. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Okay. Minutes ago, he said, Bill, how is it that a network crew was able to come in from out of town to work in Detroit for several days and take two experienced, very mature, elected, powerful public mayors and intimidate them and scare them and con them into saying things they didn't want to say? It seems to me that's a pretty valid question. Tony Franco, you've been in the public relations business for a long, long time, and Keith Butler, you're a politician in the public eye. Would you address yourself to Mr. Rose's question along those lines, either one of you, please, to kick this segment off?
Well, I'd be happy to, Bill. I think that I'm really surprised that these two gentlemen would sit there and try to tell people that they're doing this all legitimately when they come in and interview somebody for 90 minutes, take the mayor and call him corrupt to whether it's federal officials or whatever. I think the real question here is that I think that was a poorly produced show that was unbalanced, and I think these two fellows ought to be ashamed of themselves for trying to misrepresent it as anything other than just a horrible slam at Detroit, which is going to do nothing but hurt us across the nation. And if they're proud of this show, I think they ought to get in another business.
Mr. Franco, what was inaccurate in the report?
Well, it's not right. You came in here specifically to do a hatchet job, and you say you did a balanced story. You didn't do a balanced story. If that's a balanced story, you ought to go in another business. I'll be glad
Mr. Franco, do you live in the city of Detroit? Mr. Franco, do you live in the city of Detroit?
I do. Wait a minute now.
Mr. Franco,
yeah, hold on. Let me answer. I hear my name.
Okay.
I not only have lived here, I went to school here. I graduated from high school here. Hang on. Hang with me, pal. I graduated from college here. I lived here for 10 years. I presently live in the suburbs. But that isn't the point of this whole thing. You're asking me a question. You're asking me a question.
Is it fair to say, T.Y. Chang, that neither you nor Mr. Franco physically live in the city of Detroit, and neither does Mr. Rose? The three of you don't live in the city of Detroit, technically.
Bill, and you don't either.
That's right. I didn't say I did.
When I lived for 5 years and reported for 5 years in the metro area,
I'm trying to steer this in a direction. T.Y., I'll get back to you in just a moment. Keith Butler, it seems to me that Judd Rose and T.Y. Chang bring up a valid point. You don't bully, and you don't con, and you don't scare Colman Young, and you don't scare Ronald Bonkowski. How do you respond to that? What would you have done if you found yourself in the situation that Bonkowski and Young say they were in?
Well, one of the things clearly that they did is that they did bait it. And the mayor shouldn't have used that kind of language. But on the other hand, in an hour and a half interview, when they come at you from those kind of angles, sometimes people lose their cool, and none of us are perfect, and we know that Colman blows his top sometimes.
Do you think Colman would like to have those parts of the interview back?
Probably not. He is what he is, and he is what he is, and he says what he believes that he ought to say, and that's his choice. But I don't think that this story was balanced. I'm surprised that T.Y. Chang with this, because it's true that Detroit has killings and fires and that there are bad parts of the city. But T.Y. also knows that there are kids here who are making it, that there are neighborhoods that are real solid and sound, that there's some very good things here. He can show that either. That's what we're talking about, being balanced, T.Y.
That's not true.
And I live in Detroit. So I'm not like the suburban people here. I live in Detroit.
That's the point I'm trying to raise.
Yeah, T.Y. Chang, you've been here before, and you and I have covered the fires before. We know it's an ugly, phenomenal kind of a thing. I saw your piece. 17 minutes is not a long time to tell the story of a very complicated, troubled, big American city. But I saw no mention, I saw no efforts, I saw no pictures of the 35,000 volunteers who worked with the mayor, with the fire department, out there preventing fires in the neighborhood. Wasn't there time for them?
Bill, you know, when Flight 255 crashed in Detroit, should we have shown all 9,900 other flights?
Let's talk about your show.
I'll answer your question directly.
Let's stick to what we're talking about.
Can I answer?
Yeah, I hope
ask you a question. At least let me answer, okay? The point I'm trying to say is this. I wish I could have seen, when I was in Detroit, more roundtable discussions about shot teenagers and dead kids. More roundtable discussions about unemployment. And yes, white flight and racism, which we mentioned. We also mentioned the downturn in the auto industry. We also mentioned drugs and crime. And we also mentioned black responsibility. These are 4 things that we mentioned in our story. It wasn't just one point.
Bill, that's a good point, but I'd like to just say one thing. I think, Bill, your question deserves a direct answer, and I'll give you that direct answer. I think that the fact that there were 35,000 civilian volunteers?
That's right.
I think that's a wonderful, positive thing. I'm glad to see it happening. But the fact remains that last week on Devil's Night and during the Devil's Night period before and after, there were more fires than there were the year before. There were more people arrested for violating curfew. The fact is that, positive though that development was, it not only didn't cut down the fires grew from the year before. Now that's news, and you know that as well as I do. And the fact is, this is still the only city that I've ever seen, and I heard a lot of other people there at the fire scene say the same thing, the only city I've ever seen that burns itself down in this fashion, and that's news.
Well, Judd has answered the question directly. Keep up. I hear somebody who wants to answer. Who is it? I want to see y'all.
Judd got his facts wrong again. The curfew arrests were down this year. They weren't up.
He said fires, not curfews.
And he said curfews also.
By the city's count.
Yeah, but T.Y.'s wrong when he said that there aren't people who are meeting. There are people who meet every day on the kids' problems, every day on education problems, every day on neighborhood problems. I mean, there are lots of things going on out here.
When was the last roundtable discussion
and
in Channel 7?
And you don't get the TV stations to come out very often and cover those kind of meetings out there in the community and what people are doing. Most times, when we see the TV crew is when the bad things are happening. We don't see the TV crew very often when the good things are happening out here, and it's just not balanced. It's not fair.
Well, that's very true, Keith, but I'm going to tell you something. We didn't have all the network crews over in Saudi Arabia until there was trouble over there. So the nature of news is really a departure of the norm, and that's the way the business is. Not that there shouldn't be an effort to do good news. There is an effort to do good news. The fact is that bad news kind of dominates. You know what I'd like to get now in the middle of this, because we still have a few minutes left. Mayor Bonkowski, you're sitting out there as the white mayor of a predominantly white suburb. What do you think, how do you think that predominantly white community of yours is reacting to what they're seeing and hearing in terms of the prime time segment and what we've tried to do here tonight for almost an hour on Channel 7? How do you think Warren and its people are reacting? And how are you reacting?
Well, Bill, I think that our community pretty much keeps to itself.
Okay.
The only time our people get involved is when their own 55 by 120-foot lot's affected. And I think that's historic of the community. We've been able to mobilize people for the betterment of the community, and I alluded to the neighborhood watch groups and the community awareness groups. There was a comment by an individual.
Make it quick, if you can,
okay. There was a comment by an individual, and you know the nice thing about America, anybody can say anything they want at any time. It does not necessarily mean that is the majority of the people that are speaking or thinking that particular thought.
There are two people we have not heard tonight who have a vital part of the city of Detroit and the overall Detroit community. Paul Hubbard of New Detroit and Lawrence Patrick of the Board of Education. Mr. Patrick, you're in education. You're trying to do something new and different down there. What's been your gut reaction and your cerebral reaction, what you've seen and heard tonight?
You know, Bill, I think we all can certainly acknowledge that we have some problems here in Detroit. Like Councilman Butler pointed out, crime, drugs, unemployment, those are problems here as in other large cities. But the real question is, what are we going to do about it? Here in Detroit, we made a decision a couple of years ago. It was clear to us that contrary to popular belief, the future of Detroit is not going to be decided in the City Hall, Lansing, or even the nation's capital. It's going to be decided by how we treat children in the classroom. We made a decision. We're going to educate our children. That decision back in 1988 to put education first. When
I understand that, Mr. Patrick. What I'm asking is, this kind of a program is going to have an impact in terms of Detroit's image around the country, if not the world. What do you think this kind of image, this kind of program is going to do to the image of young blacks in the city and middle-aged blacks and elderly blacks in the city of Detroit?
Well, once again, Bill, rather than spending time talking just about image, here in Detroit, we've made a decision as a community that we're going to do something about our situation by, number one, making certain that we educate all of our children. And over the past 2 years, we've taken some very positive, dramatic steps to place ourselves on the cutting edge for radical reform. We're going to educate all of our children. And I know the story didn't talk about the budget that's now balanced with the Detroit Public Schools, and the fact that we've wiped out our debts, and the fact that enrollment is up for the first time in 25 years, but we're on our way. And so we don't have to worry about it.
I'd like to get to Mr. Hubbard here for just a second. Mr. Hubbard, you've been very, very involved in the Total Detroit effort for a long, long time. We began by saying that Colman Young thinks this is a racist story. Was it, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it was, and we could see it. It was full of stereotypes and also comparing apples and oranges. One of the main stereotypes is when it showed all black kids doing the hammer time and showed white kids having tea in the suburbs, as though the African-American community has no particular culture. I was in Canton Township yesterday speaking to the Economic Club, and there were a lot of whites in Canton that want to help Detroit. You have good and bad whites, and you have good and bad blacks, and I think that didn't show it. Also, that if we go into compare statistics, the Detroit statistics should have been compared to the gangs in L.A., to the race problems in New York, and to the drug problem in Washington, D.C., and not compare statistics to the national norm.
Judd Rose, why don't you respond to that, please?
Well, I'll respond to two things. What Mr. Hubbard said, first of all, if he doesn't think the rap music represents the black culture fairly or positively, I strongly disagree. I like rap music myself.
It represents both black and white, not just black.
But that's really a side point. I think what Mr. Patrick said may be the most important thing that has been said all night, and that is simply this. After we're finished debating the image of Detroit, perhaps it would be more important and more constructive for Detroiters, not us, it's not our place, but for Detroiters to start dealing with the problems and the issues that we raise. I think this forum is a healthy forum, and I think it's more important to deal with the problems that we discuss than whether Detroit's image took a bashing.
Well, I think that's true from a purely journalistic point of view, Judd, and I think you made a valid point at the beginning when you said, look, Bill, Tiwa Chang and I are not here because we're with the Chamber of Commerce, and we're not here to do a puff job, or we're not here to make Detroit's image look good. We're looking for what we think is the truth. Tony Franco, you've been in the PR business. How do you think this thing played in Peoria? You've heard that old story. What do you think this has done to Detroit? Supposing that you were the head of the PTA for the nation, and you were going to bring 25,000 PTA members in here from Kansas City for the 1992 National Convention. You saw this show tonight. Detroit was one of 3 cities left. Would it still be on the list?
Well, I think it'd be a very difficult sell. Again, as I was trying to get across before, these kinds of things do hurt. I think that the kinds of programs that we have going here in Detroit, it's too bad that Judd and his associate there didn't get into those, because there are a lot of positive things going, like education. And that kind of balance, I think, would get the PTA here. But that purely a negative story would certainly keep them away.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time. I have just been told that we've got 15 seconds for me to wrap up this program. I can't wrap up the kinds of things that we've heard, seen, listened to, asked, and responded to in 15 seconds. I want to thank you all for participating. I think this has been a good use of television tonight. I'm not sure just exactly what my overall reaction is as a journalist in the city and as a Detroit person to the show I saw on Primetime Live. That's very, very difficult to separate yourself. I'm going to work on that for a couple of days. I hope this has been beneficial to you. A lot of good people here have tried to make it an informative, balanced program. Still Barnes reporting. Good night.